Michael Cohen unleashed. He joins the breakdown right now. Good evening and welcome to the breakdown. The Rick Wilson will be back with us on Tuesday. But tonight we have a great guest, friend of the show, Michael Cohen, newly freed Michael Cohen, will be joining us again to talk all about what he's been up to, his thoughts on Trump lately. He has been very vocal in his opinions on things. So we're happy to have Michael Cohen back with us. He'll be with me in a couple of minutes. And if you have questions for him, send them in at #AskTheBreakdown, and we will ask during the show. But first, there's a lot going on, lots happening in the headlines. It's a busy December news week. But I first wanted to start off with President Biden and his Summit for Democracy, which is taking place today and tomorrow. And there are some significant threats to democracy. We talk about it all the time. And during this conference, there's both challenges domestically and abroad to our democracy and just to democracy in the Western world in general. But we thought here at the Lincoln Project that it was important to highlight that democracy is actually on the ballot in 2022. Take a look at our latest ad.
Fighting for the right to vote has been a long American journey. Inspiring, painful, frustrating. But we never stopped moving forward toward that more perfect union with justice and liberty for all. Today, there is a movement to take us back. 147 Republicans voted to strip millions of their right to vote for Joe Biden. In 49 states, Republicans have passed or are trying to pass laws to restrict voting. They want us to look away, not pay attention while they steal what so many Americans died to protect. This is how democracies die. There aren't good people on both sides in this fight. In 2022, democracy is on the ballot. Vote for the Americans who want to protect America.
Like I said, democracy is on the ballot in 2022, and we will continue to remind folks what is at stake here. And frankly, I'm grateful that we have President Biden in this administration, warts and all, putting an emphasis on this. And I hope that going into 2022, more Democrats do this because the choice is very clear. In 2020, we said it's America or Trump. Now, Trumpism is the new authoritarianism within the Republican Party that is a direct existential threat to our democracy. So we need to hold these people accountable and continue to hammer it home, because no tax cut or Build Back Better plan or bridge or road matters really if we lose our democracy. So we will continue to spread that message and put out content to that effect. One other thing before I bring Michael in, because there's lots of headlines and I want to get his reaction to it as well, including Trump getting subpoenaed today, which is lovely. Anytime I see Trump subpoena in the same sentence, that's awesome. Be better when it's Trump convicted or, something like that. But baby steps, baby steps. Today, there was also Bob Dole was honored in the Capitol. He was lying in state in the Capitol today, and all of the political dignitaries were there and gave really kind words in his memory, including President Biden, where he talked about the importance of unity and of national unity, and how Bob Dole, even though they were on opposite sides of the aisle for many years, they served decades together in the Senate, that he was a war hero and that he was someone who understood the importance of service and understood the importance of national unity. And it was refreshing to hear that coming from the leader of the free world, unlike what we've seen in the past. So it was a beautiful send-off today for the one and only Senator Bob Dole. And Rick and I gave our thoughts and sentiments about Mr. Dole in the last episode. You can go back and check that out. Good stories. And Biden had a good story about Bob Dole too, and Amtrak. He said that when the federal government was arguing over whether they were going to continue to fund Amtrak, that Bob Dole quipped, because he was the deciding vote on Amtrak funding. And they said, why in the world would you continue to fund Amtrak? And he said, because if we don't, that Biden will stay here overnight and get into more trouble. Because Joe Biden would commute every day from Delaware on Amtrak when he was a senator back in those days. So just a little taste of the good old days on Capitol Hill when people got along. Anywho, without further ado, I want to bring Michael Cohen in because we've got lots to chit chat about. He needs no introduction. Mr. Cohen, welcome back.
Tara, how you doing? Back again.
Back again.
Back by unpopular demand. If you're a GOP member and a Trump lover.
Yes, well, the folks who are supportive of the Lincoln Project at LPTV are not like that, and you are back by popular demand. Your last appearance with us was epic, and we dubbed it Michael Cohen Unleashed. We kind of started our own little bit with that, and but I'm happy to have you back. First of all, congrats on your newfound freedom now. I know a lot of us were watching your countdown clock to when you were finally off of house arrest. What was the first thing you ate?
Oh, the first thing that I ate. Believe it or not, I went over to a local restaurant. It was a bacon cheese omelet over at Three Guys. You know, my wife and I, every time we walked past it during, my permitted walks by the Bureau of Prisons in my home confinement, we always would say, because we were going there since my daughter's school was relatively close when she was in kindergarten, and we always enjoyed it. We still, of course, would stop in even during my walks and say hi to the owners, and they'd be like, when do you come? And well, as soon as I'm allowed to sit down and finally enjoy a bacon cheese omelet. And I have to be honest with you, it tasted like freedom. It was delicious.
It's the little things you take for granted. I know that when I worked in Capitol Hill, I was a big advocate for these two Border Patrol agents Ramos and Compian, who'd been unjustly convicted of shooting an illegal alien drug smuggler in Texas. It was a whole big thing. And they were sentenced to 11 and 12 years in federal prison. And so I was like the Aaron Brockovich of that case and fought with, all of the congressional backing that I had and others to try to get them pardoned or commuted by President Bush at the time. And we were successful in getting a commutation. And I became very close to the Ramos family. And I was actually there. I made a promise to Agent Ramos that I would walk him personally out of prison if it was the last thing I did. And I was able to fulfill that promise. And I literally walked him out of prison with his wife and his lawyer and escorted him from Phoenix to his hometown of El Paso. And the first thing that he ate when he got out, I thought about this when I was thinking about you. The first thing he wanted was a bacon cheeseburger from Wendy's. And I have the photograph of him taking a big bite of that juicy bacon cheeseburger in the airport at Wendy's after being newly freed. So I know that first meal can be exhilarating.
Yeah, it seems like the common denominator here is bacon.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody loves bacon. Come on. Goes with everything.
Bacon, right? Except Tara, now that you've done such a great job in terms of obtaining commutations and so on, I'm going to now employ you in order to help me. Eric Swalwell, as well as I think it was like 16 or 17 other members of Congress, signed a letter to President Biden asking for him to commute the balance of my sentence. People think that just because you're off of the home confinement, it's all done. It's not true. In my specific case, Judge Pauly, in his infinite wisdom, decided that I also needed 3 years of supervised release, despite the fact I don't owe any money. Individual number one, it's so frustrating. Individual number one is walking around eating and stuffing his fat face with Mar-a-Lago fucking burgers, and here I am still having to answer to people. So let's hope that it comes through. And I thank Congressman Swalwell and all the other members of Congress who assisted. So I'm going to now hire you two, and then we'll go for that Wendy's double cheeseburger as well.
Yeah, I would hope that it's given that you live in Manhattan, that there are better bacon cheeseburgers to eat in Manhattan versus the airport at Phoenix Airport, Wendy's for poor Nacho at the time. But listen, I wish you the best of luck with that. Commutations and pardons are highly political and oftentimes are very difficult.
As was my case, by the way.
Yes,
right.
Well,
highly political.
Yes, as you know, as you well know, these prosecutions also can be, as was theirs. So, but I wish you the best of luck with that, and hopefully that'll, that'll come through. Usually, people in Congress that have influence with the Justice Department have the most influence in something like that.
Well, on top of that, with the second remand of me back to Otisville, the unconstitutional remand, the way that the law works on that is you put the government on notice of your intention to make a claim. And I think this is the longest of all of the time periods, but the government has 6 months within which to respond to your notice. My 6 month on that unconstitutional remand is over on, I believe it's either around the 15th of this month. On the 17th, which is that Friday, I'm scheduled to file the complaint that is now fully done, drafted, brilliantly done by these two attorneys that I have, Andrew Laufer and Jeff Levine. I mean, it's like 22 pages of facts that will make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, because it's so gross when it's all in sequence of what happened. And now you're finally going to understand the true story of the weaponization of the Justice Department by the former president, along with a complicit and willing asshole, meaning Bill Barr.
I suspect that there's a book coming out of this. Is that what is my inclination here correct, Michael?
Well, yes, it's not on the complaint, but it certainly, I'm going to call the second one, it's called The Department of Injustice, and it's going to be a complete forensic dissection of the entire case. And we found out, because I hired a journalist, an investigative journalist, and he's digging into everything. And some of the documents that we have already uncovered, and some of the conversations that he had and is continuing to have with FBI agents and so on. It even makes me sick.
Well, what do you say to the people who are like, yeah, but too fucking bad, Michael? You got him to bed with Donald Trump. You got what you deserved. What do you say to them?
Well, I can't argue with them, but I don't believe that I should be the only one who is suffering the consequences. Yeah, I did what I did in terms of Stormy Daniels, as far as the plea that I had taken with, say, Karen McDougal. That's just not true. Right? I didn't pay Karen McDougal a single penny. The $150,000 that for some unknown reason the media just gets wrong, and they refuse to acknowledge that they're wrong, even though they know for a fact that they are. That was paid by the National Enquirer and David Pecker. I didn't do it. We were going to afterwards, at the direction of, and of course for the benefit of, Donald J. Trump, we were going to buy the life rights, but I never paid a single dollar. And yet I'm the one that has to plead guilty, and the Southern District of New York passes on everybody else and provides them limited immunity. I don't know. That's where the book is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see more of kind of the corruption of the Justice Department. And not to say, I mean, you've been very open about where you feel like, legitimately there was wrongdoing, and where you feel like you were, railroaded. And I think it's fair for people to hear both sides. And, as you continue to speak out, they will, and they can make their own judgments on that. But speaking of justice, hello, Donald Trump subpoenaed today. This is, a lot of people have been waiting for what the hell's happening in New York. You have the Weisselberg case and the tax stuff that's going on in New York with Cy Vance, and it feels like it's going a little slower than people would like. And then you have this New York Attorney General, Tish James, who came out today and said she wants Trump to sit down for a deposition. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts on it. First of all, I think the best article that I've read so far comes from the New York Times on it. It was actually three individuals wrote it. This guy, Bromwich, Ben Protest, and Willie Rashbaum. And it really lays it out perfectly. Remember that Tish James's case against Donald Trump is not criminal. It's civil, and it's all predicated on Donald's business practice. And what they're looking to do right now is to find this evidence, right, of wrongdoing in the civil inquiry. So what they want to know is whether or not the Trump organization engaged in criminal fraud by intentionally submitting false property values and documentation to potential lenders. Now, what makes that interesting is two things. First and foremost, you get Donald Trump under oath. Donald doesn't know how to tell the truth.
Right.
I mean, other than maybe giving his proper full name, everything else is going to be filled with complete lies because that's who he is. That's what he's about. The guy wouldn't know the truth if it punched him right in the freaking face, right? He's just a liar, our former liar in chief. And we've seen that with what? I think they said there was a statistic that Donald lied to the American people 8.5 times a day.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's hard to imagine. But where the second part comes in that's very interesting is that Cyrus Vance Jr., and then, of course, it's going to be handled by Alvin Bragg
Right.
as of January 1. That's criminal. And I guarantee you that Donald will do everything in his power to not sit for that deposition. He'll file actions. They'll delay it as long as they can, simply because the second he puts that hand up and says, I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, right? You know that that's a lie
Right.
in and of itself. and Cy Vance, Alvin Bragg, they're going to be able to take advantage of that because their action against Trump, Weisselberg, the Trump Organization, and others is of a criminal nature.
Right. And there's actual real consequences there for perjury or for lying under oath in a deposition versus it's a little bit different in the civil case. I mean, you can get in trouble for that too, but it's not the same. It doesn't have the same teeth. So I mean, he's been able to weasel his fat ass out of these things so many times. I mean, I think that I've called Donald Trump a vexatious litigant because I think he's the definition of it. But he seems to always get away with this. I mean, you've been on the inside. You've been helpful in some of these cases. I mean, I think that your insider knowledge on a lot of Donald Trump's behavior and business practices is probably valuable in these instances. But what is your inclination here? Is he going to get a freaking way with this again?
No. And I believe that the district attorney's case is a whole lot stronger than what the general public believes. I do. There is so much documentary evidence that has been provided to the district attorney's office in this investigation. And I know this because I provided thousands of documents. And I can tell you that any one of those documents are enough within which to indict him, Don Jr., Ivanka, Jared, Eric, Weisselberg, and others at the Trump Organization for criminal activity.
So what do you think's taking them so long? It's taking them so long.
That's the $1 million question, Tara. And I have to be honest with you, like yourself, every day I sit and I wait and I wake up and I turn on the news,
right,
hoping to see what I saw today with Tish James, Donald Trump subpoenaed to be deposed, right? I'm waiting to see Donald Trump's fat ass indicted, right? And having him with that fucking sourpuss, right? The one that looks like he sucked on a lemon and someone farted in his face, standing before a judge, turning around and saying, what's going on? Right? Yeah. I'm innocent. Right. It's all political. Everything is political.
It's a witch hunt. It's a witch hunt. 2020. That was the real insurrection. I mean, he's been a bit more manic lately, if you have been paying attention, and I'm sure you have. Some of the things that he's been coming out more and more, going to these fundraisers and speaking at Mar-a-Lago, and he sounds like the drunk uncle. You would never convince me that he wasn't a drunk, the way that he goes off on these tangents and can't put a sentence together. But we all know he doesn't drink. But he sounds like the drunk uncle at a wedding where he's like, crashes these people's weddings. And then he's supposed to be giving like a toast to the bride and groom. And he goes off on these rants about like what happened in the old days and how persecuted he was with the election. And he was on Hugh Hewitt's radio show this week too, going off on Mitch McConnell, and he's just all over the place. It just seems like he's a bit more manic than usual.
Well, because everything is now finally coming to a head. That's the thing about time, right?
It's the Russians. Well, while Michael tries to get that together, So let me give a little context on the Hugh Hewitt radio show. So Trump was, when you give him that free flowing, no structure, just open mic, questions, he goes off, and he went off on Mitch McConnell and about how stupid he was voting for the infrastructure bill, and he was attacking everybody and their mother about what losers they are and how weak America looks now, and just constantly going on with his grievance mongering. And this is something that we have been pointing out for a long time, that there's this splintering within the Republican Party. McConnell is trying to move on and think that, well, we don't really care about Trump, but Trump continues to assert himself. And you've got McCarthy on the other side, who's up Trump's ass, trying to keep him happy and all of the crazies, the cacophony of kookery in the Congress happy, so that when they take Congress over, we hope not, that McCarthy can become speaker. But we all know that that's not going to happen either. Michael, are you back with us?
I am.
Okay,
Sorry
good.
about that.
No, that's okay. It happens. So we were before the technical difficulty, we were talking about Trump's behavior and him being a bit more manic and going after McConnell, and him kind of still whining and bitching and complaining about losing in 2020.
Yeah, so what happens is everything is now coming to a head. And that's the thing about time. Yeah, you could, like Alan Weisselberg, you could say, oh, not guilty. And they'll say, okay, fine, we're setting this case down for trial August or September of 2022. And in your mind, you're like, that's a fucking long time away. We'll figure this out by then. Unfortunately, comes July, and you're like, oh my God, I got 30 days left before the shit's going to hit the fan. Now I really have to figure this all out. And, I, on the other hand, of course, was given 48 hours. And I got to tell you, those 48 hours were the longest 48 hours I remember in my life, until they put me into solitary confinement for 51 days. And that was the longest 51 days of my entire life, right? But that's what's happening now. He's starting to see the writing on the wall. All the cases that are pending against him are beginning to come to fruition. And that's the thing, again, like I was saying about time, it ultimately comes to be your day. And I don't believe that Teflon Don is going to get away with it. I know the information that the district attorney has. I know the information that Tish James has. First of all, with Tish James' civil case, when they find him guilty, and they will, it's going to be hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, which is why, of course, the great American grift is going on. He has access now to like 150, 160 million, of which I believe 90% of it he can use at total discretion. So to all of these idiots out there that are taking their hard-earned money and giving it to a billionaire in order for him to pay off certain taxable consequences, right? That's what you're doing. And what do you get for it? Nothing.
Right. Un gazzangulo, as we would say in Italian. So that leads me to this other thing. You brought up the grift. This new company that he's setting up, this SPAC, which I'm still bringing myself up to speed on how this all works, because I was unfamiliar with this type of setup that can exist legally. So he's doing this thing where it's supposed to be starting a new social media company or some kind of BS. And there's been a couple of articles out there detailing what a bunch of BS this actually is, and how this really is just a money-making grift for him that could be to the tune of $1.6 billion valuation. And by the time, he gets the money up front with the way the investors work and all this, and by the time people wake up and realize they've been taken, he's laughing his fat ass all the way to the bank again. How familiar are you with what he's doing now? And are all of the suspicions that this is really just a bunch of BS, are they overblown, or is it true?
No. So actually, I'm quite knowledgeable on SPACs. Many years ago, before working for Trump, at this white shoe firm that I was at, we used to do quite a bit of SPACs, and then doing what's called reverse mergers into the shell corporation, which is not a bad thing. Shell corporation just means that it was once listed and now it's delisted, but it's still active. So in that way, you don't have to refile with the SEC. But in this
give
specific,
the Cliff Notes version of what that is, because I know a lot of people are unfamiliar with the setup. Like
if I can, I'd rather walk you through the whole thing here.
Go ahead.
Right. First of all, it's called, from what I remember, it's Trump Media and Technology.
Right.
Right. And
Something like that.
they have nothing right now except for Devin the dummy Nunes, right, as its new president and CEO. The question I would always, the first question I would ask on this is, how much are they paying Devin, right? Because, and then second, if I was an investor in this SPAC, I would be curious as to why Devin Nunes, simply because, to my understanding, not only is he stupid, and again, when I was testifying on the Hill, I mean, I had a lot of stupid people asking me very stupid questions, and he was top 3. So to have him as the president and the CEO of this Trump news platform and technology, what background does he have in this that makes him the right person for it? Now, I want to go to a bigger issue that you have here, is the valuation. They have like this $1.7 billion valuation, and it's predicated on what? On his brand value of of Trump, right? Should be worth 1.7 billion. And I'm already familiar with a open investigation now, I believe, by the SEC into this entire scenario, because again, all it is Donald Trump the grift part 2, right? Part 1 was the super PAC that he now has complete access to. Part 2 is now this Trump platform. And they'll just continue to do it. Why? Because he's losing everything else, and he stands to lose all of his valuable property. So let's say hypothetically that he owes back taxes to the tune of $350 million, right? And I'm just making an arbitrary number. That's not just 350 and you're done. Don't forget, government has penalties and interest. So with the penalties and interest, it could be 750 million, because it's like 2% a month, and it's non-negotiable. It's by statute. So he could really get smashed with 700 million of outstanding liability.
And where's he getting the money?
There's only one place. He's going to take some of it from the PAC. He'll take some money, whatever he can grift and grab off of from this media platform, if he's even able to do that. But what he's going to be forced to do is to sell assets. And when he starts to look at what assets that he could sell, golf courses, you can't sell. And the reason you can't sell them is because they really don't make money. So if someone's going to buy it on a valuation, you're not going to get enough, not to mention, even if he sold, for example, let's just say Trump National Golf Club in Westchester, right? And he's able to get $100 million, and it's not worth anywhere near that. He only owns that for about 10 or 12 million. So he still has now taxes on the $38 million profit that he made. So it's not as if you get dollar for dollar for yourself to undo. You have to then make like $2 billion in order to pay off the 7 million, because on the 2 billion you owe Uncle Sam $1 billion.
Which is why I know that we have a difference of opinion about whether Trump will run again in 2024. You've said that you don't think he's going to run. We think he is going to run, because one of the reasons behind, besides the fact that he can't stand being irrelevant, but the other reason is because he wants to shield himself again from all of these things that are coming home to roost. And if he runs again, and God forbid if he won, then he could go back and try to kind of push this down the road and push Father Time down the road, and chicken's coming home to roost. But so do you still think that there's no chance that he runs, minus a physical ailment?
Well, let's not forget that I beat Nigel Farage for $10,000 in a bet, which, by the way, I donated all of it.
Did you? I was unfamiliar with that.
I did. I bet Nigel Farage $10,000. I then gave the money away to 3 different charities. And I won, because I actually understand the guy. He can't afford to run. And you say, well, how's that possible? He can't afford not to. No, he can't afford to run. And the reason is because that's when the great American grift comes to an end. He's going to use that they stole the election from us in 2020, as he does when he goes and he makes a wedding speech at Mar-a-Lago, or wherever the hell anybody will sit and listen to him. right? So he'll walk down the street, he'll see some cab driver, he'll stop him. They stole the election from us. The guy says, I fucking hate you, I'm a Democrat. He'll go, they still stole it from me, and thanks for voting, right? I mean, the guy is just, he's lost it.
He's almost there now.
If he loses a second time, it can't be like the boy who cried wolf. He can't turn around and say, they did it to me again. Right? It doesn't work that way. The great American grift is over, and it's the only way he's going to make money for the rest of his life.
So you think that it's the risk of losing that finally people will wake up and say, that's it. That's the end of that. We're done following this guy. I don't know, because
he knows he's going to lose, Tara.
Yeah. Well,
he knows he's going to lose. The numbers don't work out for him. And he knows it. They don't. You see, what Donald has is he has a percentage of the Republican base that are so intertwined with his cult, that this of Trumpism, that they will vote for him even if he's behind bars. It doesn't make a difference.
That's why I'm not sure if he loses again, that they still say, well, they'll still believe, just like the rubes that believe it now, they'll still believe that it was a big grand conspiracy and it was the deep state or whatever other bullshit that they believe, and still continue to support him. I don't know.
But it doesn't matter, Tara. It doesn't matter, because there are more Democrats in the country than there are Republicans. So that's just true. Do it by the math alone. And what Donald is going to find out is that so many of these people that are kissing his ass right now because they're fundraising off of him, they don't particularly care for him. And they're not going to. The other day I was at Fresco, with my wife and another couple. And who happened to be in the restaurant at the same time? Chris Christie. Oh. And it was funny. As I was leaving, we saw each other. I have to be honest with you. He came over. He gave me a big hug, turned around and said, so really nice to see you. I'm sorry for what you went through. You look good. And I said to him, actually, you look good too. And I asked him, are you going to run? And he turned around and he said to me, if Donald runs, 100%. And nobody really out there knows Donald Trump the way Chris Christie knows. And Chris Christie can be pretty sharp with his tongue. And I believe that a Chris Christie primary with Trump may not go the way people think. You would be very shocked. I don't think that there's enough support for Donald.
With all due respect, Michael, and I love you. We've become friends over the last couple of months. I disagree with you respectfully on a constituency for Chris Christie. And, Chris Christie was governor of my home state. I recently interviewed him when I was guest hosting The View a couple of weeks ago, and took him to task on his book, because the Republican Party that he's trying to sell doesn't exist anymore. And I just think that, this idea that Chris Christie is this tough talking guy and, he can be sharp with the tongue. Yeah, except when it came to Donald Trump in public. He let Donald Trump emasculate him in some of the most embarrassing ways that would make anybody from Jersey
it won't happen.
Embarrassed. So,
it won't happen again. Rest assured. This time it won't happen.
I have very little patience for Chris Christie anymore. I wanted to support him before, but he showed his true colors to me during the time that he was so complicit in what Donald Trump was doing. And he sat there like a lapdog for all of his tough talking Jersey stuff. He was a lapdog for Trump, and he's still not coming out and fully repudiating Donald Trump. He's still holding his cards to ingratiate himself to Trump. And I don't know. I have no patience for him, but that's okay. We're allowed to disagree, my friend.
By the way, that's right. And I still love you too, because here's the thing. We're supposed to disagree.
That's right.
I use this quote quite often. Ed Koch. This is a quote from Ed Koch. If you agree with me 8 out of 12 times, you should vote for me. If you agree with me 12 out of 12 times, you should see a psychiatrist.
Right.
And that's an Ed Koch quote. And it's right. I'm supposed to distree with you. We're not supposed to agree on everything.
No.
I don't agree with myself 12 out of 12 times. Right? I mean, the notion that we have to, or Republican and Democrat, we're entitled to have differences of opinion.
Yes.
It's just this fucking right wing, wackadoodle group that believe that if I don't agree with you completely, it's time for the AR-15s. It's time for violence and bloodshed. And this is all the doings of Donald. It's all his bullshit in his talk and go punch this guy and meet me over at the Capitol and everything else. This is on him.
And you predicted it. You predicted
I
that this would
did.
happen. And I'm sure you're not, this is one of those cases where you're like, I never wanted to be more wrong in my life, but you predicted it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not 100% certain why I decided to even bring that up. I just knew that it was important to warn the country, to warn the Republicans that were sitting there and beating the shit out of me, not asking a single question. Think about it. I show up, unlike Meadows and Bannon and the rest of these assholes, I show up off of an invitation to answer questions. Now, the questions aren't about me. They're supposed to be about Donald, the administration, what we did, etc. Not one Republican asked me a single question. They each took their 5 minutes to bash me, which was exactly what Donald Trump told them to do. Stay on message. Constantly call him a convicted liar, convicted liar. Every single one of them used the same words. And then, of course, you had Mark Meadows and Paul Gosar with the stupid liar, liar, pants on fire bullshit. These are the people who we elect in this country? Someone with a fucking sign up there with liar, liar, pants on fire? I mean, what are we, in third grade?
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's gotten worse between Gosar and now you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene and bobblehead Boebert up there, and Matt Gaetz, all, as Rick calls them, the three-ring circus over there. They are embarrassing. It's embarrassing. And you've had some choice words, speaking of Mark Meadows, who is back in the news now with this book. And also, he's suing Nancy Pelosi now, which is insane. And suing the January 6th committee for unreasonable requests, apparently. Again, just a delay tactic, in my opinion. But you had some choice words for Mark Meadows. I think you called him a stupid asshole or a dumb.
No, I think I said to him, he's the dumbest asshole on the hill.
Right. That was recently.
Let me ask you a question, Tara.
Elaborate?
Yes, I do. Tara, let me ask you a question. Do you agree with me on this one?
Wholeheartedly, my friend.
You see? I told you, we agree with at least 8 out of the 12 things. Do I want to elaborate? What's the point to So this dumbass turns around and wants to claim executive privilege. For what purpose? What was the benefit? Right? When you declare executive privilege, that means you're not going to talk about something. In essence, you're taking the fifth. But this dumb asshole ends up putting out a book. Right. You can't go ahead and write something in a book and then turn around and claim that it's privilege. You lose the privilege when you do that. And
when you're not in office anymore. It's not up to him to decide whether it's executive privilege or not, as the former chief of staff of the former loser president. They don't get to do that. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. So that's why it feels like a delay tactic, because they're watching what's happening with Bannon and how it's taking months for the criminal contempt charge to move forward in courts there, that they want to run out the clock. And Mark Meadows isn't bright. He's one of the first people that, suggested Donald Trump to be becoming speaker if Republicans take it back over. Oh, Trump could be speaker. And then you've got Matt Gaetz out here saying that's one of the first things he'll do if Republicans take Congress back is nominate Trump.
My God, you bring up this sour point, right? This Matt Gaetz, this pedophile. For God's sakes, I don't understand how this kid could even stand up on a stage or a platform and say anything about anything. My friend,
you and me both.
Go back to the junior high school, find your prom date, get the fuck away from us, go Venmo her some money in order to go get a dress and call it quits because you belong in prison. I mean, this kid belongs in prison. And the fact that the GOP has somebody like Matt Gaetz sitting there and defending them with nutjob Lauren Boebert with photos of her and her family all holding AR-15s. I mean, Merry fucking Christmas. Are you kidding me?
I know.
I mean, nobody. I believe in the Second Amendment. I absolutely do. I used to be one of like 1,000 people in New York licensed to carry a concealed firearm, non-police. Mm-hmm. And I lost that as a direct result of this. But I'm a Second Amendment guy. I do truly believe, but I don't believe any civilian should ever own an AR-15. I just don't. I don't see the benefit. I don't see the necessity. I think you could do the exact same thing with a different type of a rifle, but this is a rifle of mass destruction. This is one that belongs on battlefields, not in Chicago streets, New York streets, Washington streets, anywhere. It doesn't belong in the hands of a civilian.
And any responsible person who does own them, for whatever reason, there's arguments on both sides, right? They don't belong on Christmas cards. Like, what are we doing here? It's especially after what just happened with the tragedy in Michigan and what's been going on with, it is the weapon of choice for often times. It wasn't in Michigan, but oftentimes in these mass shootings, it's the weapon of choice for these people. And they're somehow trying to outgross each other, with this, who's more patriotic? Well,
exactly.
You look so asinine. I can't even take it. Maya May, who hosts our We're Speaking show with Lisa Senecal, she put out a tweet yesterday with a photo of her and her daughter, and it says, like, can we get the non-gun Christmas card photos going here? Because it's like, why do we have to show this off? It's absurd.
What happened to the day? What happened to the day of sending a Christmas card that's you and your family and your little Labradoodle sitting on somebody's lap, right? Turning around and wishing everybody a happy holidays. Right. Now it's like, AR. And, it's this sort of craziness and sickness that's going on between both parties that I don't know if you saw this, but I was featured in Art Basel. Right. And it's still going on with my NFTs.
Down in Miami.
What I decided to do is to turn around through a company called Art Grails, and I put out like 250 versions of my prison badge, because I really do want to do things with prison reform. And then I did the first paragraph of my book, Disloyal, right, signed and sewn, which was brought in by a guy that looks like he should be a defensive lineman for the Giants. We could use him.
Yeah.
I mean, and then they put it out there. I did it for several different reasons. One, because I think it's funny, right? Two, it's definitely a way to monetize on this NFT craze that's going on. But more important, it's really like a combination between technology, politics, and art. And it spurs conversation. And that's the conversation that I want to have. The fact that government right now is so divided. Thanks to Donald, he divided this country almost to the point like we're back to the Civil War era. Just it's not about race, it's about party affiliation. And more so as a subdivision, that's part of the subdivision.
Right.
But the subdivision is not just party affiliation, but whether or not you're a Trump supporter or a non-Trump supporter within the GOP.
Yeah, it's scary, and we talk about this all the time, that it literally is an existential threat to our democracy, because you have a full party now, mainstream, that is basically marching down the authoritarian lane here and making this like it's normal. This is the way it's supposed to be. And Vladimir Putin was on the cover of Newsmax, for God's sakes, as all hail Vlad. Now, Vladimir Putin is a hero of the right. It's the world turned upside down. It's crazy. Speaking of that, we have a couple questions from our audience that I want to make sure that I asked you. One of the questions has to do with compromise, actually. I think we have that. Yeah, here it is. H. Kleppinger. Do you think compromise is being utilized to manipulate leaders of the GOP? It's a perfect segue into this.
Well, it sure is. Both companies like Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, they've all uncovered a significant number of accounts that they believe are associated with Russia's Internet Research Agency, right? And you can't really shut them down fast enough. The question becomes, why is it being done? What do we do in order to stop it? And I would suspect that it was one of the many topics that Joe Biden had in terms of conversation with just recently with President Putin. You know, it's funny, in that whole thing on Putin, you saw there's a photo of Putin there, shirtless. He likes to be shirtless. First of all, he's in good shape. So let's give him credit for, for at least that, out there fishing, horseback, the whole 9 yards. Could you imagine the face on the horse if Trump was sitting on it, right? Or out there shirtless and so on. I mean, you ought to talk about, that's what somebody should do. They put a side by side, but legit pictures, not fake pictures. Right. They should put side by side of it and then turn around and see who projects strength and who doesn't. And that's unfortunately where we're at. But yeah, I do believe
we saw that in Helsinki, who projected strength and who didn't. How Donald Trump was so subservient to Putin, and Putin was just laughing his ass off, despite the fact that he's about 5'2". Go ahead.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is that the Kremlin is believed to be involved in these troll farms and so on. And troll farms are not just simply you say something, Tara, on your Twitter account, and then all of a sudden you get 30 or 40 people who turn around and start saying nasty things about you. Oh, I hate your hair, right? I hate what you're wearing. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about sophisticated troll farms that are able to create advertisements, create rooms, chat rooms, where they go in and they organize events that people show up to, and nobody really knows who actually even organized it, but just they create this hate group and then go ahead and do what they need to do.
And Russian intelligence is behind all of this. And the Mueller report outlines it. We can see what they did in starting in 2014 or 15. They laid the foundation for it. And it still continues today. It still continues today. It was one of the most successful intelligence operations, I think, ever in Russia's history, unfortunately. And thanks to Donald Trump and his corruption there with all of that. We have another question. What's the next one? There we go. What is Trump's weakest point that could benefit the left? This is a good question, Michael. I mean, you have some insight into how Trump thinks. What are some weak points that the Democrats could use to run against him and Trumpism going into 2022 or 2024? God forbid if he runs again. I think we should make a bet.
Wow. That's actually a really great question. What are some of the things how about all of the litigation that's pending against him? The fact that Donald Trump doesn't read, the fact that he has no knowledge and no concept of history. And unfortunately, they don't attack him hard enough in terms of who he is. We do. We do this. And that's why even on my podcast, on Mea Culpa, I constantly attack Donald. Now, I also will give him praise. Yeah, he was instrumental in knocking out the FDA so that we can go ahead and get the vaccine in warp speed, right? We got to give him credit for that. He deserves it. But what he doesn't deserve credit for is not having a plan to get it into your arm, right? Into having a distribution plan. So you got to give him credit for what he's entitled to. But at the end of the day, it's so few. What did he actually accomplish in 4 years other than tearing things down, other than dividing our country, other than when I'm walking down the street the other day with my wife, having some idiot in his Suburban with a camera out there cursing and screaming at me on the streets, right? I mean, that's what Donald created. And did you ask these people, what is it about Michael Cohen that you hate? Oh, you're a rat. Okay, I'm first of all, there's a difference between a rat and a cooperator. So again, I'm just going off on a tangent. We have to talk about the hatred. We have to talk about the fact that he didn't read one single memo, that there's only one bipartisan deal that got done during his 4 years, and that's not even being implemented. And that's the First Step Act that was done
criminal justice reform.
That's right, on criminal justice reform.
So just to put a finer point on the weakness thing, and as we wind down our time together, it feels like we've tried all that before, right? There's people we've already seen all of Donald Trump in his worst. January 6th and what he did on January 6th, I think, is treasonous, and yet so many people don't care. A poll just came out, a generic poll, that if Biden and Trump ran again today, it would be 43-44 or 46, 45. Like Biden would only win by 1 percentage point, which is too close for comfort for me with the Electoral College. So I don't know if any of those things are actually going to matter, what that you listed, because we see them as weaknesses, but 40+% of the country would still fucking vote for this guy again today.
Yeah. So Tara, here's where I'm going to disagree with you, right? And hopefully you'll acknowledge my point. I don't think the Democrats have the right people doing the message about Donald.
I agree.
I really don't. And how I know this to be accurate and fair is simply because at the end of the day, I started my podcast while on home confinement. I started it 1 year ago, and I'm doing 1.3 million downloads a month. So I have already just one single guy, right, with a production company, Audio Up, great guys, managed to be a top 3% news podcast. And they like what they're hearing. They agree. And each and every week we follow the number of individuals greater that are joining the podcast and listening than the week before. And we're growing every single week. Since I've started, we are growing, which means that like mea culpa is creating a movement. Now, can I do it alone? Am I the savior of our democracy? No. But Lincoln Project with you, Midas Touch with the Marcellus brothers, and a handful, Rachel Maddow and others, there are enough people out there that have big enough followings that can make a difference. The problem is that the Democrats constantly show themselves to be toothless. And that's the bigger problem. They just don't want to engage in the fight. You know who does? You do. I do. Marcellus brothers do. Scaramucci does. Right.
So I think the parting words from Michael Cohen, who has been in the trenches, who has paid a significant price, not only in personal reputation, but in freedom. You are saying that the Democrats need to be tougher in their messaging, pointing out what a danger Donald Trump and Trumpism actually is to this country, because otherwise, if they don't get it, they're going to lose it. We're going to lose it. And it requires us to continue to fight and to continue to get more people, because I often say there's more of us than there are of them. So be encouraged that the righteous anger of the American people will win out. And that's where we need to stay. In that this is
Tara,
a
could you possibly
battle.
Tara, could you just imagine if we turn around and we put on, instead of a CPAC type event, and we call it DPAC, right? And you start to fill the speakers up with people like yourself, people like the Marcellus brothers, myself and others, and you turn around and you just make an event out of it, like a full-blown weekend out of it. I can only imagine the coverage. Can I say one last thing before we go? I'm going to tell you where a big problem I'm going to tell you where a big problem comes in. So you were talking about it before, where Joe Biden today met for the Biden Democracy Summit.
Right.
And I was watching that with great interest, as I'm sure Republican and Democrat alike were. And what ended up happening? As he's giving his opening remarks and so on, after, I don't know, what was it, approximately 4 or 5 minutes, all of the news stations cut out and they started talking about what? There's not enough fucking cream cheese in New York or some other insignificant tidbit, no matter what it could be.
Right.
This is
Which
the
is a thing,
democracy. This is
That's
a
right.
world democracy summit. And they don't broadcast the entire speech. Instead, do you remember when everybody was doing Donald's?
Yes.
Remember, everybody was sitting there and they were all from start to before he even walked in, showing the crowd, to
The
after
countdown.
he's smiling, pointing, the whole stupid bullshit. No, it's wrong. They should have done it. This is democracy, folks. We're not talking about cream cheese here. We're talking about fucking democracy. And they didn't even cover it more than 5 minutes. That's the problem.
I think that is well put, and a good place to end it, because you're right that part of how Donald Trump was covered the way the media frames the narrative has great impact on the way that people ingest information, and it formulates the way that they look at things and their behavior. It informs them on how to behave. And I could not agree with you more that the media was certainly complicit in building up Donald Trump and not holding him accountable back in 2016. And then they helped create that Frankenstein monster, and we're still paying the price today. But it's not too late, because every day we make decisions on how we cover Trump, what information we put out there. And I hope to God that our media ecosystem has learned their lesson going into 2022 and 2024. All right, Michael Cohen, it's always fun, my friend. Are we going to put a bet?
Tara, good to see you.
What's our bet? I think we should bet on whether Trump runs in 2024 or not.
All right, I'm willing to take that bet.
All right, what are we betting? Or we can talk about that offline. But the bet stands.
Bacon cheese, the best bacon cheeseburger in town.
and I'll the loser has to pay, right?
That's right.
All right. Michael Cohen, always a pleasure. Be sure to check out his very successful podcast, Mea Culpa, and look forward to the next book.
Thanks, Tara. Good to see you.
And have a great holiday season, my friend. Well, that is it. Michael Cohen, again, always a good time. He never holds back. And we will be back with you guys on Tuesday. Rick will be back. And yeah. That's that. Have a great weekend. Happy holidays, and get your vaccines, boosters. Get your boosters.